Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Indian Boxer Ring. Today, our guest is Dave Gilmour. Dave Gilmour is a boxer breeder under the prefix Zeracon Boxers. He is also a life member and the current president of the Boxer Club of Canada. He's also a member of the American Boxer Club. Dave is also a judge, a licensed to judge Group 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, in his capacity, in this administrative capacity, um, he has he's actually been a part of different clubs, and he has also mentored aspiring judges at the American Boxer Club specialties as well. Now, Dave is not just Dave is not only focused on form, he's also focused on function because Dave has taught socialization and obedience classes as well. He has extensively participated in obedience trials and confirmation shows, and he has also taken tracking lessons as well. Now, in as far as judging goes, Dave has judged a lot of specialties extensively in North America. And if I'm going to actually list out the specialties that Dave has judged, it's going to take me another 20 minutes. That's quite a wide list that he's got. So I'm not going to go there, but I can tell you that he's judged specialties in boxers, in Siberian Huskies, in Prairie Australian Shepherds, in Doberman Pinschers. He has actually judged in one of the cluster shows at the American Boxer Club as well. Now, he has actually gone out of North America. He's judged outside of North America. He recently judged in Australia. He judged at the Boxer Club of New South Wales specialty. He just did not do just one specialty. He did, I think, multiple specialties. I think 4 of them in 2 days. He judged the American Cocker Spaniels, Gordon Setters, Whistlers. So Dave brings a lot of knowledge and perspective about not just boxers, but about a lot of different breeds, and being a playing a part as not just a dog lover. Well, that was the starting point, but he's actually gone on to become a successful breeder, having bred many champions. He has also moved on into the administrative capacity, being a president of the Boxing Club of Canada, and he also is a successful and a well-renowned judge as well. So with this limited introduction, I know you're curious to know more about Dave's journey with dogs, and so it's with great pleasure that I invite Dave to Indian Boxer Ring. Dave, how are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing great, and yourself?
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. Dave, I know there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people that have tuned in to watch this interview. So for those ones that are watching this interview, I know you might have a lot of questions for Dave. So feel free to post your questions under the comment section, and I will make sure that I'll place these questions in front of Dave. And again, so let's get started then, Dave. If you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Dave, as with any interview, I would love, I've actually done quite a bit of research about your journey about boxes. But for the benefit of those viewers that are tuned in, could you share your journey with dogs? How did you get started with boxes and with dog shows? Now, again, the other part of the question is, did you have any mentors? And what was the most important advice that they gave you?
We actually got into, I hate to say it, got into boxers quite by accident. My wife and I had been married for a few years and we thought we'd bring a dog into our life. And we looked at a few different breeds. Actually, my original thought was to get a Doberman, believe it or not. But we didn't go there. We ended up, one of the people that she worked with had boxers. And so she had mentioned to him. And so we started doing some research in boxers and thought it looked like a very interesting breed. And then we ended up finding out where she got her boxers from, which was from a small kennel, probably about 20 miles out of town from where we lived. And so one day we just decided to go out for a drive, and it says, well, let's try and see if we can find this kennel. And sure enough, we ended up finding this kennel. I says, you know what? I'm going to go and knock on their door. Well, about 4.5 hours later, after seeing every dog that they had in their kennel, which was about 20 dogs, and spending probably 2 hours playing with a litter of puppies, we were hooked. We knew we wanted a boxer, and they actually did have one male left in the litter, which we didn't commit to. But by the time we drove back home and got home, says we like him, we phoned him, and that was our start into boxers.
Okay.
He was.
I think 4 hours looking at dogs, that must have been quite a learning in how
Oh,
you
it was a little bit of information overload, because they showed us every single one of their dogs, pulled each one out of their kennels and brought them out and introduced us and let us play with them. And it was quite an experience, because they had a lot of different styles just within their own breeding program too.
Right. Dave, the second part of this question is, I know that you have listed on your website, Zaracon Boxers. You've listed some mentors, and not a lot of people, I know we all have mentors, and that's mentors play an important role, but I don't see people listing them on the website. You've listed 3 of them. Can you talk us about your mentors and how they help you with your learning curve?
Well, I mean, they were our first introduction into the breed, and they were show people. So we got the perspective from what you're looking for in a show dog versus a pet. Different the characteristics, are what is the type of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a couple older ladies, is actually what they were, and their introduction, or their breeding stock that they had, actually went back into a lot of very, very important lines that used to be back there. I mean, their kennel was heavily sowed with cell gray boxers. They had a lot of that. They had some of the gay mitts line in, because they used to co-breed with another kennel called Gaylord Kennels, which had a lot of the gay mitts line in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to breed back and forth. And so, I mean, that was, mentors made a big thing. And then, of course, we got more mentors as we went along, because we start meeting more people. And like, we ended up buying one of our dogs from a lady in Ontario called Mary Curl. We talked a lot with people like Medley Small, Jack Ireland, and then a lot of the Americans too.
Mm-hmm.
Dealt with a lot of those. I mean, one of our very, very first dogs that we competed against, and we took our very first dog that we bought, which was a pet, and had enough faults to choke a horse. We ended up taking him into the show ring anyways. And it was an uphill battle, but I did end up putting his championship on him. But it really, and one of the things that our mentors taught us was learn to lose graciously. Because you're going to lose. You're not going to win all the time. And of course, we started off with a pet, so we learned to lose. We learned to lose graciously a lot. Well, and the thing is too, our very, very first, and the Indian boxer ring people, I think, would recognize the name, is a dog called Bogey, or otherwise known as Golden Haze's Tuxedo.
Right.
Well, that's who we started competing against with our pet.
Right.
So
that's competition in the tall order. Yes.
Yeah, no, it wasn't easy going, but we still achieved it anyway. So, like I said, that was the one thing, and the other thing our mentors told us is to be true to thyself, and know where you're going, and know your limitations. And there's only so much you can do. I mean, our second boxer that we actually bought a show prospect,
right?
And we did a fair amount of winning with it for the little bit that we did, because in the early years I showed all our dogs, and believe me, a professional handler I'm not.
But you finished the first dog, despite all the faults. So I'm sure you got your knowledge in showing dogs would have grown exponentially in that time frame.
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so.
Right. Dave, I want to actually ask you this. I know that making the transition from having decided to keep a boxer and showing a dog deciding to breed them. I'm interested in knowing how your blueprint evolved, the blueprint of an ideal boxer evolved. Now, a lot of people say that the boxer is a head breed. My question to you is, do you think a boxer is a head breed?
Yes, a boxer is a head breed, because that's the one striking feature about a boxer that really sets it out from a lot of the other breeds. Because you can look at body types and there's a lot of similarities between a lot of different breeds. I mean, they're not all exactly the same, but there is some very distinctive similarities. Of course, ours stands out more because it has no hair on it. But the head is that trademark stamp on the breed. And heads have changed. I've seen them we've been involved with it now 34 years, is we've seen heads come and go.
Mm.
They've gone short muzzles, long muzzles, narrow muzzles, wide muzzles, apple heads, square heads. It seems to be, and I guess it's where people go, and it's the breeding principles that some people use. They're trying to fix something, they gain something else, and so that's why head types change.
Right. But it is a head breed. That's what uniquely identifies the breed, and that's how that's.
It's. But I mean, and that's actually an argument that Patty and I get into quite a bit. Is we go back and forth. I'm a movement person. And she's a real strong head person, and we get into the argument of, well, if you look at if this dog moves better but doesn't have a good head, and we go back and forth,
right,
talking about that. But the head, yes, is a very important part of the breed, but the dog also has to be able to do the job that it was bred for.
Right. Got it. Stay with me just a moment. Now, you can hear me all right, Dave?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay. All right. For those viewers that have difficulty hearing it, please post your comments, because I just got a comment from one of the viewers who said the sound was low. I've just adjusted my mic. So if I'm too loud, Dave, it's not because I want to be too loud. It's just because people should hear. That's all.
No, you sound fine.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Okay, Dave, I want to actually move on to this part of your journey when you decided you've had your first dog, you finished him, and now you decided to actually take your second dog, which is a show prospect, and you decided to breed that. Now, you mentioned about the head breed, about you and Patty having conversations about, is it movement, is it head, which is more important? But of course, I also know that Patty is the brains behind the breeding program as well.
Yeah.
So how important is it for every breeder, according to you, to have a blueprint of what they want to breed in their head? Now, has your blueprint, Dave, changed over the years?
I think it has changed little bits of it. I don't know that we've seen any real major swing in what we want now versus what we wanted back then. We've just fine-tuned little things, looking at whether you like a little bit difference in the head, a little more stronger head, or dealing with things like, do I want better top lines or better angles, or there's just been little things that have changed. But I can't say that we've all of a sudden said the dog that we bred 30 years ago is that dramatically different from what we breed now. It would just be subtle changes.
Right. Now, in terms of, and again, I think I asked you when we connected before the interview, I asked you this question about breeding principles, because for the benefit of people that are novice and who are new to the breed, this question is a very pertinent question, because they talk about these principles of line breeding, inbreeding, and outcrossing. And Dave, you answered that question back to me in less than a minute. I was like, okay, all right, that's a concise answer, Dave. But for the benefit of those people that are tuned in, um, I would like to hear your thoughts about these principles of line breeding, inbreeding, and outcrossing. Is there a magic formula that one should resort to, or is there a time in their breeding program that they should resort to one breeding principle versus the other?
Yeah, there's quite a few different trains of thought on that. We have used a combination of line breeding and outcrossing in our breeding program. We have never done any inbreeding, and I guess it's because I'm too much the chicken, I guess, in that, because inbreeding, though it can turn around and bring out some beautiful traits, it will also bring out possibly some of the worst, because it means you're doubling up on whatever you have. And if you've got some bad physical trait or even a health trait, you may turn around and just amplify it more times than you're going to want to deal with. Whereas in the same breath, and I mean, I can think back all the way back to the famous Cell Gray F litter, where they turned around and bred a brother and a sister, and ended up getting some of the dogs that are all laced throughout all of our pedigrees.
Right.
And so, I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Line breeding and outcrossing, little safer territory to be in. I think you need a mixture of that, because there again, that same thing with line breeding. It's not quite as bad as inbreeding, but you're still going to amplify some of the problems that you have within your line. And so you're going to have to sometimes bring something else back in to correct it. And it's like a lot of people, we've owned both fawns and brindles.
Right.
And we know that when we're doing our breeding program, is that we've always got to keep bringing our brindles back, because otherwise you end up with washed out fawns. I mean, sometimes I've seen some lines where they seem to be quite fortunate that they seem to manage to maintain their fawns without a lot of brindles in there. But I've seen a lot of lines too where they got very, very washed out after time, and they brought brindles back in and brought the color back.
Right. Now, I know I'm going on a tangent with this question. Since you brought up about the brindle and the fawns, do you see a disproportionate amount of fawns in the ring now compared to the brindles? And is that a trend that you're noticing with the breed?
Well, I'll be honest, we've watched that trend go back and forth for years. Or it may be, you may be looking just from going to the American National, would be some years that there's lots of brindles and the fawns are lower. Then you go back a couple of years later, now there's lots of fawns and not that many brindles. It's it tends to go in cycles, I guess. I don't think that ourselves here, we don't really care. We like both colors. Right.
Now, you mentioned about this dog in the passing. You know, when you started showing your first dog, you were up against this dog called Golden Haze Tuxedo. I remember from seeing his pictures that he was that, they call it the reverse brindling or the seal brindling. You know, they call it the dark brindling.
Yeah.
You don't see those many dogs in the ring as well. Is that something which you see as a trend?
Well, you know what? I can't remember how far back. I remember many, many years ago, we used to see a lot of dark brindle. But I haven't seen a heavy trend as of late. But there again, it's gonna end up being I hate to say it, the flavor of the day. Everybody sees this dark brindle winning, and then all of a sudden everybody else wants a dark brindle.
Right.
And they come and go. The real dark ones are a little harder to produce. You don't see as many of them around. And of course, usually unless you get the nice markings with them, a lot of the real dark brindles are plains. And we know the plains have a tougher time in the show ring, so you don't see them out as much.
Right. Right. True. True. Now, and again, I'm sure when you mentor judges, you also mentor breeders as well. I'm sure people actually reach out to you to get your thoughts about breeding and of course you discuss these principles, and I'm sure you will share them with them as well. But in your mentoring uh, new breeders or talking to them about what is the type of dog they should be breeding, um, do you actually think um, it is important for breeders to establish their own kennel phenotype in their breeding program? Should breeders aspire to breed something which should actually have their unique stamping or identity?
Well, I don't even know that sometimes whether people physically or mentally turn around and decide what their phenotype's going to be. It's it's what appeals to you. I mean that's why different dogs win different days at a dog show, because this judge puts more emphasis on this part of the dog. This judge puts an emphasis on a different part of the dog. And I think breeders are that same way too, is they look at what they can live with and what they can't live with.
Right.
And I think that's really how a lot of the different styles that we see out there is because what they have, what their eye sees and what draws them to a dog and what's their prime concerns.
Right. Right. True. Um, Now, again, I want to actually move on. I want to cover about the important problem facing the breed, which is the longevity of the breed. And I want to actually talk about specifically about health testing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dave, how important do you think health testing is to a breeding program? And I actually ask this question um, in the context of of how we have evolved in terms of classifying the importance of health testing over the years. Um, 20 years back or 25 years back, or maybe at the time that you started, health testing would have probably been not as important as it is now. So there's been quite a change in the thought process when it comes to health testing. So as an administrator, as a breed preservation, somebody who's interested in breed preservation and promotion, how important do you think health testing is to a breeding program? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think health testing is one of the cornerstones of any breed. It's a very important thing. I mean, you're right. Back when we first got started, I mean, we used to test back in those days, and you don't see anybody doing it now. We used to test for von Willebrand's. That seems to have disappeared in the breed in the early years that we got involved in. I mean, we've always tested for hips, but even back in the early years, that was really the only tests we had to do. There wasn't any real talk about any other problems. And then our next foray into health testing, we got started involved in doing heart testing. And even at that, it was in its very early years, it wasn't easy to get it to start out with, and nobody really talked about it. We're fortunate here. We actually, in our province here, we actually have one of I think the 4 veterinary colleges in Canada is based right in our province. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to go up there, and they had a board certified cardiologist on staff. So we were able to go up and get our color Dopplers done and that type of stuff. But that has changed so much, because we can think back of the first dog that we ended up having it done on. We actually excluded her out of our breeding program because it was in what they called the gray area. That gray area now is 100% acceptable.
Mm.
So, that tells you how much even health testing changes over the years, that they may take what used to be considered a bad result is now considered good for the breed. It may not be good for every breed, but it may be good for what we have within our breed. I mean, we do the SAS testing. We have done some of the ARVC. We DM test. So, I mean, definitely those, you can't say, and I've come across it in the past, is you get breeders that say, we don't have that in our lines. We don't have heart problems. I tend to disagree. They're back there somewhere. They may just not have surfaced and caused you any problems yet. And the bad thing is some of these issues that we deal with for heart problems, they don't show up until all of a sudden I want to call it catastrophic failure of the heart, or they get masked by other things like cancer. The cancer gets them first, and you don't realize there's even a heart problem until, say, you ended up doing an autopsy on your dog, which we do on all of our dogs pretty much that pass away. Because they're part of our breeding stock, we end up having autopsies done, so we just know first what did they pass from and what other issues were they dealing with.
Right. No, you bring you bring my next question, Dave. So the question is about the evolution of health testing. Some health testing in its infancy, is not definitive. There's a black and white. There's a gray area too.
Yeah.
With certain health testing, the gray area is we have enough data, factual data, to understand that it's not gray anymore. It's very black and white. I would say Halter testing, which made its introduction many years now, has reached that point. Now, I want to contrast Halter testing with gene-based testing. Now, gene-based testing meaning ARVC or DM. We have identified maybe not all the gene markers to make a definitive choice or make a definitive decision if it's actually the dog is at risk, or how is at risk going to be impact the longevity of the dog. Now, there are certain tests that are recommended with certain clubs. They say this is a background test that you want to do on your dog. But I want to ask you this question from the context of doing all these tests. If you did all these tests, you're essentially limiting the breeding life cycle of a dog, because if you do all these tests, you probably by the time you complete these tests, your breed is going to probably be around 2.5, 3 years old, or I'm just maybe exaggerating, maybe 2 years old. So from 2.5 years to 5 or 6 years old, you probably are going to end up having, very limited litters and limited breeding stock. So what do you think is more mandatory, and what is good to have in terms of the Halter testing and gene testing, testing recommended for dogs?
Well, I'll be honest. We consider Halter testing a very important part of what we do here. I mean, I realize you're only looking at a 24-hour snapshot of the dog, but if you're doing regular Halter testing, if you've got a problem, it's going to show up. And yes, I realize that some people are looking that, we're saying if we wait so long, like for instance, say hips, for instance, you wait till they're 2 years old. If you're waiting that long, you're going to end up shortening the amount of puppies you can produce. Well, I guess the thing I have to ask is, are you producing quantity or quality?
Right.
You've got the health testing's a must. You have to do it because it has worked, because when we very first started getting into boxers, everybody talked about, what's the life expectancy of a boxer? Well, our breeders that we bought our guys from, they said, if you're lucky, 8 to 10. Now, we still tell our puppy people 8 to 10, but we also throw in the caveat that we're starting to see a lot of dogs living a lot longer. And I think that's because we're making the effort to do the health testing and trying to breed the best we can. Is health testing a guarantee? No, never is. But all you can do is put your best foot forward and try and produce the most healthy, sound dog that you can.
Right. True. Now, I know as the president of the Boxer Club of Canada, and also being engaged closely in the administrative aspect of the breed as an administrator, you you're deciding the direction of the breed, and you actually have the vision for the breed as a long term. My next question, Dave, is going to be a very hypothetical question, and I actually wanted to ask you this question. I've asked this question for a few times before in the past, um, but this is my turn to ask you this question again. Now, if during the required health test is made a mandatory requirement for a dog to be considered for the highest honors, would you support it?
Uh, yeah, putting me on the spot here. Um, there's a lot of good merits to a program like that. Now, we also, and I guess the part I have to throw in here is we also know that with very careful and select breeding, we can work on, I say, breeding out some of the health problems as well. So I don't think just a health test should be what determines whether a dog's should get the highest honors or not. I definitely think there is some basic health testing that we should get involved in nowadays that unfortunately is not mandatory. And I don't mean for any highest honors. I just mean what we should, as a breeder, as a breed club, instill in the people that deal with us that this is the minimum you should do. And unfortunately, we're not at that point yet. I know of there is lots of breed clubs out there that are very, very strict. That if you want to be a member of this club, these are the breeding program practices that you're going to be this disease or that disease. You must test for it in all your puppies. We haven't got to that point here yet, and I'm hopefully someday we will.
Right, right. I want to actually ask you this now, since your interest as you have, you're not bred Dobermans, but you have judged Dobermans, and I know you are interested and you follow the breed. Now, in one of the interviews that I actually had an opportunity to see, they actually mentioned about the American Doberman Club has the longevity markers. When the dog reaches 10 years old or 11 years old, this is actually a database that they maintain. It actually has the marker that the dog has crossed 10 years or 11 years. Do you feel something like that will benefit boxers? A database like that?
Oh, I definitely think it will. But longevity is not the only part of the picture. You still have to have that health testing in there with it to know what's bringing about the longevity. Just to say that my dog lived to, and we know of boxers that are 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. Sometimes it's come from very regulated breeding programs, and sometimes it just happened. And so I think definitely keeping an eye on those dogs is a good thing. But I guess the other thing is, do we know why those dogs live to be that age?
Right. Got it.
And I think that's the important part is is definitely keeping track of them, but knowing what brought that end result as well.
Sure. Agreed. No, fair point. I think I want to move from health testing on to breeding, which is something which is some dogs actually come in and they decide the course of the breed. They decide they decide how the breed is going to move, the direction of the breed. They do that. Now there are also some dogs which people choose, just like you said, the flavor of the month. There are dogs that actually win a lot, and people want to breed to that dog. Now, this is loosely termed. This is actually loosely termed as popular dog syndrome.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about the popular dog syndrome and its impact on the breed?
Popular dog syndrome. That's good and bad. Yeah, I realize a lot of people do end up breeding to flavor of the day, and sometimes that shows up. I guess it depends on that dog you're breeding to, is knowing what its progeny is that you've seen so far, and to see if it actually puts a stamp on the dogs. because you've got to have the right combination of dogs. I don't care how good that stud looks. He isn't going to fix every problem you've got, and he may end up bringing a few to the table that you didn't know of.
Right.
And that's the whole problem, because I mean, I've seen it over the years, and I can think of like one of the things that really bothers us a bunch is croups on boxers. And I've seen some of that popular dog syndrome. All of a sudden, I see a whole bunch of offspring with bad croups. And being the fact that they were bred to a bunch of different bitches of different bloodlines, you sort of have to put 2 and 2 together and know that where all of a sudden this came from. I mean, but in that same breath, I have seen some studs that they seem to fix certain problems in bloodlines. You know, like you'll breed to this dog and he'll just give you beautiful top lines. It doesn't seem to matter what you breed him to. You breed him to a camel and it'd have a nice top line. You know, it's just how some dogs are. Some dogs are real strong at passing on their traits, and others don't.
Right. True. Dave, I know that being a Canadian, and being proud to be a Canadian, and we actually, Canada has contributed a lot to the flavor of, or to the direction of, North American boxers. Now, looking back in the last 50 years, there have been some popular sires that have come out of Canada. I would say Mephisto's boxes have contributed a lot to the complexion of the breed.
Yeah.
Fashion Hint, you can't forget Fashion Hint, Milan's Fashion Hint, the dog from Ontario. Shadrach was dog, and Sherkon's Shadrach.
Yeah, Sherkon kennels.
Yes, and then we've had Memory Lane kennels in boxers in Canada. So Atacrest boxers. How do you see the contribution of Canadian boxer breeders to the North American boxers style evolution? Has that been because they have been similar, or is that because they have been different in style?
I think it's more because they're similar than different. I mean, if you go back in all of our pedigrees, you'll see breeding going back and forth across between the two countries pretty much nonstop. I mean, I can look at just our original, we don't have that bloodline anymore, but our original lines were cell grade. And so a lot of the stuff that we had was American based. But then they ended up breeding to some Canadian stock and changed things a little bit. But so I think the Canadian boxer fancy has contributed a lot to the North American. And I don't want to say type, because type's the same no matter what. But the North American style is, because we do breed, it's so easy to breed across the borders.
Right.
We end up getting our kennel. You really look at the bloodlines behind them, and they're all so much similar. I mean, Bogey's a good example. Bogey was a Canadian bred dog, but there's American dogs in his background. Well, then Bogey was bred extensively in the US and in Canada as well. So there's a popular dog syndrome, but you could see his puppies though too. When you saw a Bogey puppy, you knew it was one of his. So, I mean, he stamped a lot of stuff on the breed and made a big influence of it. But in the same breath, we get so many American dogs that influence what goes on in Canada as well. So, I mean, I think, does Canada breed beautiful boxers? You got that part right.
Right.
And it shows. I mean, we can go to the American National on an ongoing basis, and we're head to head with the Americans and doing every bit as good as them, if in some years a lot better.
Right.
So, I mean, evidently that we can breed the right style of boxer as well.
Right. I know this is actually this was many years back when I was actually when I was showing a dog in Toronto. Uh, this breeder approached me, and she actually asked me, "Is this a West Coast dog?" Meaning, this dog does not seem to be an East Coast dog. Um, East Coast dog in terms of style. Is there even in North American style boxers, there is a difference in style between the East Coast and the West Coast? Do you see that there is a differentiation in
Yeah.
terms of where the dogs come from?
Oh yeah, there definitely is. I mean, even you can even split it up as into Northwest Coast and Southwest Coast.
Hmm.
Is the dogs? It's not that the styles are. The biggest difference I notice is in size. I see a lot of the dogs out of the Northwest are what I would call a moderate size, whereas you get a certain amount of them down in the southern portion of the West are getting back up into the larger size.
Hmm.
And the East Coast, I think, is sort of the same along that lines too. There's different groups where, I mean, the styles are primarily the same, but there's just some little subtleties, and I think it has a lot to do with the breeding programs that are going on in that area and them concentrating more on using the stock within their geographical location than they are, say, shipping semen or sending dogs across the country.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's what does end up making a difference.
True. True. Dave, I want to actually move on to your journey. Now, you've actually been. At what point did you decide to get more involved with the Boxer Club of Canada in an administrative capacity?
I've been involved administratively for quite a while. I think it was just giving back to our breed, and wanting to help out within the club. We've been members for many, many years, and decided that we just wanted to help out. And I think my first position was vice president, and then ended up becoming the president after that, and have been for several terms now. But it's giving back to the breed and trying to help where we can.
Right. Right. Now, in terms of you mentioned that the United States and Canada work very closely in the breed. There's crossover. There's dogs being used, efficiencies, or studs being shared. All of these things are being done. Now, could you talk about the interaction between the American Boxer Club and the Boxer Club of Canada? Now, do you work together on any projects, or is there a common vision that is shared between the two clubs?
Well, I can't say that we work together on any common projects. I think we work together in the sense that there's a certain amount of the Boxer Club of Canada members that are American Boxer Club members. So, I mean, we're a very small club with very limited resources. Whereas you get the American National Club, which they don't have unlimited resources, but they have a lot. So I guess we get to work together with them in the sense that we do all the health. We try to work within all the different health aspects that the American club tries to put forward, because they've got the research and the dollars to back the research. And
Right.
all it can do is benefit the breed on both sides of the border.
Right. True. True. I want to come back to the Boxer Club of Canada.
Yeah.
Now, as the president of the Boxer Club of Canada, Dave, what do you see as the most important challenges facing the boxer breed in Canada?
Well, I think, of course, we've seen all the issues we've been dealing with cropping and docking, and that has changed the breed quite a bit. And people say, well, how does that change the breed? And I said, well, docking, I mean, we've got hairless dogs, so we've always been able to see what's going on in the back end. But the thing is, we have cropped for so many years. Nobody is bred for natural ear carriage, because we end up cropping off a certain portion of the ear and then training at the stand. So we're not really caring what the natural ear carriage looks like.
Right.
So I mean that is definitely one thing that we're looking at. That's a major thing within the breed. And I mean, and it's not just Canadian, it's American as well, is we've got some issues going on within the breed, you know, whether it be, like you said, the bad croups, over-angulated rears, straight fronts, top lines that are all over the place. We definitely do have problems. And I mean, some years we do better than others at fixing them.
Right. True. I want to actually, since you're also the director for Saskatchewan, in the board of directors for the Canadian Kennel Club.
Yes.
My next question to you is actually about this notion. This notion that it is easier to finish a dog in Canada because you don't have to get let me actually retract. It's easier to finish a dog in Canada, and it's much more difficult to finish a dog in the United States. And with that particular context, I want to actually ask you this question. The point requirements, like, for example, the number of points the dog should earn in order to be awarded the title of a champion is 10 points in Canada versus 15 points in the United States. Now, I know that at some point, that decision was made about 10 and 15. Now, do you feel that the point requirements for awarding the title of a champion being different between being 10 and 15? And do you think there is merit to this to this statement that it's easy to finish a dog in Canada? And my second part of the question is, would you attribute the difference in terms of points to purely be a difference in the volume of exhibits that are being shown in Canada versus the United States?
Well, I mean, the 10 and the 15 points is sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word for it here, isn't really the problem when it comes between the two different countries. The Americans, and I don't know how many people are familiar with it, the Americans run a program called majors required and needing certain sizes of majors. Well, here, when we call it a major, it's just based on a very random amount of dogs, where it being, we have the one dog versus is no points, 2 to whatever is this, and we require what much smaller, where is I can think back a long time ago, our very first dog that we showed in the States, he was at a show in the US and he ended up getting a 5-point major only when it went crossed over. But if he would have only just got the male points, his 3-point major was, I think, 49 males.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas here, a 3-point major is 6 to 9 dogs.
Right.
So, and the thing is, you need those minimum 2 3-point majors in the US. Well, that's a lot harder to get. You got a lot of dogs to beat to get to that point. Now, it depends on the areas. It varies from year to year, zone to zone, as to what the actual majors are. But there's still substantially more dogs required to beat than there is in Canada.
Mm.
And so, yes, I mean, I will agree our championships are easier to get here. I'm not saying that there's any less merit to a Canadian champion, but they definitely are easier to get.
Right. They want to actually ask you about this question. You have judged, in my introduction, I stated that you have judged so many specialties across North America and now in Australia as well.
Yes.
You pretty much you've traveled, to a lot of shows and across the world, and you've seen boxers with different styles and virtues. What do you see lacking in North American style boxers?
I think the biggest thing, if I had to say lacking, is some of our bloodlines lack enough substance. I mean, our dog is a medium-sized working dog, which means, I mean, no, we're not back to the old days when they had to end up taking down bears and bulls and that type of thing. But they still require the substance to be able to sort of do that job. I mean, we don't see them used so much in North America because of our climate, but I know many, many years ago, that used to be one of the police dogs that was used in Europe in the more temperate climates where they could handle the climate year round. And I mean, so to do those kind of jobs, you need to have a certain amount of substance to your dog. And I think some of our boxers have gotten a little bit on the fine side.
Right. What do you think about, or what do you see, has the temperament of the boxer in North America, has that been bred down a lot to a point where the boxer, when you measure the boxer, you base it on, temperament is an important measure as well. Do you see that temperament in an North American style boxer has been bred down over the years?
I don't know about bred down. I think some people don't put as much emphasis on it as others. I mean, to us, that's one of the key parts to the breed is the temperament. I mean, it's not a boxer if the temperament's not right. I mean, they're that jovial clown that you have in the house that's having fun with you the next minute, and the next minute will guard your house with its life. And that's the mixture within the breed. And I mean, I think sometimes people forget that that's an important part of the breed. And
Right.
I don't say that they're breeding it down. I think just some people don't put as much emphasis in it as others do.
True. Now, this in terms of in terms of the focus areas that we have for the breed, I know that breed type, balanced temperament, health testing. These are all cornerstones of the breed.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the litter sizes? The litter sizes in the breed, because we hear a lot of, or I see a lot of show breeders advertising their litter size to be 3 puppies, 4 puppies, 5 puppies. Is that typical of a breed of a boxer, or have you reached a stage where that's not a concern for breeders anymore? And I say this in comparison to the breed like a Doberman. Or a breed like any working group breed, their litter sizes are definitely much bigger than what we see in boxers. Have we actually pushed ourselves into that position?
I've seen it all over the ballpark as far as litter sizes. I mean, we have had a singleton puppy in one of our litters, but we've also had an 8, a 9, and a 10. So I think it definitely depends on the female. I mean, your male, I mean, he floods it with all kinds of material there. It's up to how many eggs the female is. And I just think some females are more fertile than others. Does it fit within a particular line? I don't know, because I know the line that we were originally in, our litters were usually, I want to say 3 to 5 that we had, but I know the breeders had bigger litters, 6, 7, 8. So I think it's pretty much just a matter of each dog, each female is different than the next. And I've even seen it, that singleton litter that we had, the next time she was bred, it was either 5 or 6. So I think a lot of it, and we were novice breeders back then.
Right.
So I think a lot of it came down to, knowing proper timing and everything involved with it that maybe in our early years we just didn't know enough. So things were sort of hit and miss. We got better as we got older, and I wouldn't say the litter sizes changed exponentially, but our litter sizes were probably bigger as we got more experienced.
Right. True. David, in terms of, this is a question that that comes up a lot. Especially for somebody who's looked at boxers across the world. And of course, you being in Australia, having judged boxers in Australia, Australia blends. There are breeders in Australia that blend English and English styles in their breeding program. There are breeders in Australia that breed European lines in their program, American dogs in their program. So when you had judged there, I'm sure you would have seen a variety of different boxes of different styles there. But what are your thoughts about blending styles in boxers?
I think there's merit to it. I'm not saying all styles are blendable. The European stuff I don't know enough about, but from what I have seen, I don't know how well that would blend into North American style dogs, because they are a very different dog.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the basics are there, but there's so many very distinct differences. Whereas we have seen it lots. We've seen the North American, English, Australian, New Zealand. We've seen all those groups sort of intermix. Not so much the Australian coming back here, but we have seen a lot of our North American dogs head to Australia,
right,
New Zealand. Same as we've seen a certain amount of them, or some of them, head to the UK, but we've also seen a lot of UK dogs come here.
Right.
And I think they contribute to the breed. Do some judges have a tough problem dealing with them? Yeah, they do, because they are different looking.
Right.
I mean, you especially, and I've noticed, I haven't judged in England, but we were fortunate enough back 5 years ago to go to Crufts, and we got a chance to see the boxer breed at that particular show was, I think, 250 boxers.
Right.
Just the breed entry. That wasn't a specialty. That was just the breed entry for boxers at that show. But then there's 25,000 dogs there too.
Right.
So their dog was definitely different looking than ours. I mean, the basics were still there.
Right.
But it's just, more substance, and not just in actual bone, but, larger heads, broader chests, definitely more bone in the body itself as well. And that's sort of a lot the same. I look at Australia and I think of them somewhere in the middle between the UK and North America. It's sort of a mixture of both.
Right. Now we spoke about the evolution of style. We spoke about we actually did touch on it, but not in a lot amount of detail. Of course, you spoke about how styles are different between different countries in your last answer. I want to actually also look at it from the eyes of a judge. Now, you being a judge, or having been a judge for many years now, do judges evolve in their interpretation of the breed standard? Or should judges be evolving in their interpretation of the breed standard? Or should they be actually, should they be interpreting the standard based on, there should not be any evolution?
Sorry, you cut out there for a minute. I missed the last part of that phrase.
Okay. No, my question is, should judges, because the standard book probably gets revised, the breed standard gets revised maybe every 20 years, 30 years. The club, the parent body revises the standard for the breed. But I've seen that in the question of hypertypes, there are certain dogs which actually look very different from the standard that actually get awarded the prize. Do you think that is because of the judges also evolving in how they interpret the standard?
Oh, I definitely think it is. I mean, there's definitely some dogs that just set themselves out from everybody else, and 10 judges can look at it and all 10 of them are going to agree. But in the next day, if you had 10 dogs in a class, you might get 10 different winners.
Mm.
And it definitely does come down to interpretation of a standard. I mean, standards, and I'm probably end up going to make not a lot of friends with this, is standards are too vague.
Mm.
You can, if being a judge and the 4 groups that I'm licensed for, is you can look at a lot of standards and they all explain a front the same way. But I can tell you the front on 4 different dogs looks differently on each breed, even though they try to explain it the same, or how they explain the top line or the rears. It's one of the things when I'm judging, and I spend a lot of time going back over, is things like illustrated standards. Not so much the written ones, is the illustrated standards where the actual breed clubs, which are the protectors of the breed, they've actually said, this is what we think it should look like. And I rely on those a lot in my judging processes, because that's the breed club saying, these are the right facts. Even though we say the shoulder should look like this many degrees, this is what it physically looks like when it's put together.
Right.
You know, and that's the same as I don't know if you ever get a chance is to see the illustrated standard put out by the American Boxer Club.
Right.
It is phenomenal.
Right.
You know, or even things like looking at going back to Danny Buchwald's book, The Boxer Blueprint.
Right.
Is being able to look at pictures of a dog and take what's written in the standard and be able to visualize it. And that's the best thing to do as a judge, is get a picture in your head of what you think that ideal dog should look like.
Right. Right.
And judge to that picture.
Right. Right. Dave, I want to actually ask you this question about the moment, you know, your journey so far. What has been the most gratifying moment for you as a breeder, as an exhibitor, and as an administrator?
Well, as a breeder, I definitely guess it would have to be, this goes back a few years now, is a male that we bred. He actually, at the Canadian National, was reserve winner's male at a very young age. But prior to that, that was the very first dog we'd ever taken to the American National. And he went in there. The handler had never seen him before in her life. She worked with him for 15 minutes one day. The next day of the show, he went in and was reserved 6 to 9 in the futurity. And 2 days later, took the 6 to 9 brindle class. And then the following year came back to take the 6 to 9 open brindle class. So, I mean, that was, I guess, our once in a lifetime dog.
Right.
Sorry, you said as a breeder, as well as a handler. I didn't handle for a lot, or as an exhibitor. And I guess that's the same thing as an exhibitor and breeder. That was our big highlight.
Okay. Right. And as an administrator?
Boy, I don't know that I have any major things that I would put in as an administrator. I can think of some very monumental things as being a judge, but
right.
Not so much as an administrator.
Well, you could actually share that moment as a judge too.
Well, I guess my greatest thing I've done judging so far was, and this goes back to that American regional, and if I'm remembering right, is I gave Wilma her very first 5-point major.
Right.
As a young dog, and then to watch Wilma grow to become what she is now, that just it's just a great feeling.
Right, right. Sure, sure. Now, since you mentioned Wilma, my final question to you, Dave, is going to be this. What are some of the dogs that stand in your mind, or some of the dogs that come to memory? Either the ones that you owned, the ones you bred, or the ones that you competed against. These are the dogs that actually, when you think back, these are the dogs that you remember. The memorable dogs.
I mean, definitely as far as breeding, of course, is our dog Declan, that male that we had. I mean, we are a very small. We have a very small, limited showing area that we have here, and also limited funds to be able to do major amount of showing. We would have loved to have done a bunch of campaigning with him because he was a beautiful dog. He was a dog that he fit within what the standard said. He was this height. It was right within the standard, the top end of it. And he just had so many beautiful things to offer. As far as competing against, well, of course, we competed against Bogey. I think more of the dogs I can think of contributing and that type of stuff is looking back at some of the dogs that we've been fortunate enough to see by going to the American National. And I mean, I can never forget the one day, and a lot of people probably are familiar with a breeder named Earl Overstreet. And one day we saw the dogs that he was handling, and we got a chance to go over to his kenneling area. And in his kenneling area, he had Jetbreaker, Tiebreaker, and Hunter, 3 generations. And to see those dogs in person and to be able to touch them and see them move and everything, it was just phenomenal. And that's some of the big dogs. I mean, and we were fortunate to see some of those great dogs like Futurian, Biff, Odie. To be able to see those dogs, it was. We even got a chance to see Piggin, and they were amazing dogs that a lot of them contributed a lot to our breed and to what it is today.
Right, right. Well, I think you covered a lot of topics. Now, again, I thank you so much, Dave, for actually accommodating within your busy schedule that the time to actually share with us your journey about dogs. I think this is very useful and valuable information for people. Gives them a lot of perspective from the eyes of not just a breeder, but also an administrator, a judge, and somebody who is somebody who actually has actually been on both sides of both in Canada and the America as well.
Yeah.
Now, before we finish the interview, Dave, do you have any parting thoughts that you want to share with our viewers?
Parting thoughts. I guess the biggest thing I can say is if you're a breeder, do your research. Both health. I mean, when we're looking at doing a litter, I mean, we're going back 4 and 5 generations and looking to see what's behind, see what has been coming forward. And unfortunately, not everybody can get to shows like the American National and that, but those are so important to get there because you can turn around and see what the progeny look like of, say, certain studs or even just certain bloodlines to see just what they're breeding and what they're bringing forward in the breed.
Right, right. Continue to be a student of the breed and try to research.
Well, we've been in this 34 years, and I'm still a student of the breed.
Right.
You
right.
never quit learning in this breed or any breed. Dogs is a permanent learning experience.
Wonderful. On that note, Dave, I want to thank you again for your time. And for those viewers that tuned in, I hope you found this useful. And Dave has graciously agreed to answer your questions. If you did not get a chance to put any comments, and if you get to watch this interview at a later point, because this interview, Dave, is going to be available in on YouTube. It's going to be a permanent record. It's going to be available for people to watch and reference as they see fit. I think on that note, I want to thank you again, Dave. Have yourself a wonderful Sunday and the rest of the day. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, Dave.
Pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Same here, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.